The following is a presentation of the Pro Wrestling Report. Informative, entertaining, and real since 1998.
Coming up next, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Pro Wrestling Report Primetime Wednesday night. We've got this week's top five, Ask the Booker profile looking at Paul Heyman. But first, we're going to kick it off with Be the Booker, starting right now, right here on the Pro Wrestling Report Primetime Wednesday night.
This is the Pro Wrestling Report Primetime TV, the longest-running pro wrestling news program in the world, with your hosts, David Hero and Damian Nelson. Welcome to PWR Be the Booker, the only way to preview pro wrestling pay-per-view events with the Booker man himself, David Hero.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Pro Wrestling Report Primetime Wednesday night. Damian Nelson standing here alongside David Hero, and you see the board, the whiteboard. It's time to talk about the upcoming wrestling pay-per-view known as TNA Sacrifice, which is this Sunday night on pay-per-view. And what happens in this segment is we take a look at the matches as they have been announced. And this one, as a Booker man, goes through how he would book the show. If that's the way it happens to turn out, they become predictions. If not, it's just for entertainment purposes. Either way, you'll get it honest and the way only a broadcast journalist can present it from me. So without further ado, let's start it off with a matchup between Bully Ray, who is one of the top heels in the business, versus the X Division champion Austin Aries. This match is for the X Division championship between those two.
You know, it's interesting. Wasn't it Bully Ray, the guy that beat up a whole bunch of X Division guys a few months ago?
Yep, years ago. It was a while back.
Oh, okay, a year ago, whatever.
Before the Aries era. Now, let's make one thing crystal clear, by the way. Austin Aries is a part of the elite team, the recognized symbol of excellence in pro wrestling, the Nelson family.
That's fine. You can be the flatlining team all you want. It's
That's
okay.
fine. How many people do you have on here?
I have Anderson and Rude. And I'm sure one of my guys will be in the TNA television title match on Sunday as well. Has yet to be announced, Super Friends. But the fact of the matter is just Bully Ray and Austin Aries, two guys that don't like each other. The past couple weeks, they've been butting heads, getting in the way of each other, back and forth and back. Title match, Bully Ray. Here's the problem right now with TNA Impact Wrestling. If you look at this card, they have 1.5, 2, because the tag team is considered 1, 3 heels on this pay-per-view.
Joe and Magnus aren't heels?
No, Joe and Magnus are baby faces now. Yeah. The fans love them. So they only have really 3 heels. Bully Ray needs to beat Austin Aries. Not that he should, but he has to, because right now, if he loses to Austin Aries, a smaller baby face, the X Division, hey, it elevates Austin Aries if Austin Aries wins. But Bully Ray needs to grab that title, become the X Division champion, make a mockery of it for a little while, and then let Austin Aries come back and beat him for the title. Bully Ray will leave Sacrifice, the TNA Impact X Division Wrestling champion. You don't like that, do you?
Not at all.
And when I do this,
yes, you do.
It's not for selfish reasons. It's about positive points or negative points.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
It's all you think about. I mean, I understand your desperation having lost last year. As a matter of fact, let me prove to you how much you've lost and what that desperation is from last year. Because, you know, always right here within a shot of me and easy to grab is the cape. So if you want, I can put my robe back on and just make sure you see my trophy, because I beat you. You're a loser.
Is that where you have your pimp juice or whatever in there?
Why would I have pimp juice?
Well, you got the pimp glass.
This is a trophy from winning.
Sure. Can we just try to keep this about the
next
show?
matchup, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Anderson one-on-one with Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy, also a member of the elite Nelson family.
So this this is us. This is me versus you, you versus me.
Well, clearly Jeff Hardy wins then.
No, it's not. First of all, Jeff Hardy, he's been winning. He has won. He's already been.
Great match with Kurt Angle, defeated.
Fantastic. Yep. So why not give Ken Anderson his turn? Because they're going to need someone to work with Bobby Roode eventually. He only worked with RVD for so long. They need to make Mr. Anderson relevant again, give him a good spot. By beating Jeff Hardy, definitely makes him a #1 contender for Bobby Roode's TNA Impact Wrestling Heavyweight Championship. I've already tried going for the mic, but the problem is you got duct tape and super glue and other nonsense up there. Next week, it's coming back.
Why would you lie to all those people?
I'm not
You
lying.
have no control over that.
Of course I do.
Next matchup is Kurt Angle versus AJ Styles. AJ Styles, there's going to be some significant stuff happening this Thursday on Impact. Let's just say that, which make this match more interesting going into it.
And I think it's because of all those different shenanigans that AJ Styles will be distracted, and that's going to allow Kurt Angle to get the victory over TNA Impact Wrestling's favorite son, AJ Styles.
Let's not lose sight of the fact of how tremendous this wrestling matchup can be between these two. Well, I'm not sure the last time we've had the opportunity to see them in a singles matchup on a pay-per-view.
These two guys are going to steal the show like they usually do.
Tag team titles on the line as Joe and Magnus defend against Daniels and Kaz on Sacrifice on Sunday.
Right now, Joe and Magnus are the best tag team in all of wrestling.
Surprisingly so.
Amazing.
Who would have thought those two together?
Yeah, they just threw two guys together in that wild card round robin tag team tournament they did. And Joe and Magnus, they are gelling. They are clicking. And let me tell you, this match here is going to be fantastic because Daniels, Kaz, and Joe have tremendous history with each other. 3 founding fathers of the X Division are going to now be in a tag team match. But at the end of the day, they got to keep it going. Joe and Magnus are dominating TNA Impact Wrestling tag teams, and let them keep rolling until another tag team comes along that can rival them as far as charisma, moves, and fan favor.
Machine Guns?
I don't think the Machine Guns are coming back for a little while.
Next matchup is for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. Bobby Roode defends against Rob Van Dam in what is going to be a hangman match.
It's a ladder match.
What the hell's on top?
That's the belt hanging.
It's not that close to the ladder.
Well,
take a rung off.
There. Happy?
The main event at Sacrifice this Sunday. Bobby Roode's the champion, RVD the challenger.
Yes, and you know what? RVD is he is the guy that is perfect for this match. He's known for ladder matches. He's known for crazy flips and back bumps and the whole thing. And what better way to establish Bobby Roode as the main man in TNA Impact Wrestling, winning a ladder match, winning a match that he is not known for, that he's not really been a part of. Bobby Roode will leave Sacrifice, the TNA Impact World Wrestling Heavyweight Champion.
And to summarize what David Hero would have happen this Sunday on Sacrifice on pay-per-view from TNA Wrestling, Bully Ray defeating Austin Aries, becoming the new X Division champion. Mr. Anderson getting a win over Jeff Hardy. Kurt Angle getting a win over AJ Styles in what no doubt would be a tremendous matchup. Daniels and Kaz are not successful in their quest to become the new tag team champions. And Bobby Roode remains successful as the top talent in TNA Wrestling, the man who wears the gold, the World Heavyweight Champion.
And of course, there are rumors of a Knockouts title match and a TV title match. We don't know what those are yet because obviously it's Wednesday night.
We're in SFZ?
Yes.
Spoiler free zone?
Yes. So that's why those matches aren't listed. So anything that's on here is what we know for sure is going to happen.
And what we know for sure as well is the Pro Wrestling Report Primetime Wednesday night will continue. After this timeout, we'll go to this week's top 5. And still to come after that, we're going to do a profile of Paul Heyman and also your question and Ask the Booker. Pro Wrestling Report Primetime Wednesday night continues after this.
This is Impact Wrestling star, my dude, Robbie E. And bro, you are watching the Pro Wrestling Report on My 24 Milwaukee. Oh!
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Pro Wrestling Report, primetime Wednesday night. Damian Nelson sitting alongside David Octavius Tiberius, the alleged backyard one-time Hall of Fame.
One-time
hero. And it's time to go to this week's top 5. And coming in at number 5, ladies and gentlemen, is a man who can only be classified as one thing, a true champion. He is the man who this past Monday night on Raw showed you the strategy needed to be a successful champion, a successful Intercontinental champion, successfully retaining his championship gold against the monster, the Big Show.
Run, Cody, run.
You, as the challenger, have to beat the champion. The champion does not have to beat you. Cody Rhodes is a brilliant champion. And please, again, remember the hashtag, Save Cody, because as you know, he's on the Mighty Mouse Club. And as a result of that directly, his career will probably have some setbacks as long as he is associated with that one.
Since he's been on my team.
My top 5 coming in at number 4, ladies and gentlemen, is, you know what? It's not wrestling related, but it's my top 5, so I can do anything I damn well please. The Avengers. An epic movie. I saw it in IMAX 3D this past weekend, and it was simply fantastic. I would have to say if I had to pick a favorite character, it would probably be Thor, not Fury, as most of you would assume I would pick. But great movie, and that comes in at number 4 on the top 5. Coming in at number 3, ladies and gentlemen, on this week's top 5 list is a man who I think is still one of the greatest, if not the greatest, heel in professional wrestling right now. He comes from TNA Wrestling, and his name is Bully Ray. Again, his interaction with Austin Aries and Jeremy Borash at last week on Impact, simply fantastic. He is a man who you believe wants to hurt you. He is a man who is just plain evil, and I love it. And it's a great, great thing to see him each and every week on TV. Coming up at number 2 in this week's top 5 is CM Punk. For those of you who follow at CM Punk on Twitter, you noticed on Monday he took a stand for something he believed in and then lashed out at a fan saying that he wished that fan would die. And then what really put him on the list was not either of those two things, but what he did subsequently after that, which was apologize directly to that fan and then provide words of encouragement to all of his followers. So a rare thing for CM Punk and a commendable thing that he did this past Monday, placing him at number 2 on this week's top 5. And number 1 goes to the shocking return this past Monday night of Paul Heyman to WWE Raw. Nobody expected it, nobody spoiled it, nobody ruined it, which is what made it great. Paul Heyman back in WWE, and given the amount of dates that Brock Lesnar is slated to work with WWE, this makes all the sense in the world. And how funny is it, David Hero, that number 1, Paul Heyman is a man who is best known as of late for his managerial duties in WWE, comes back a week after we talk about the need for managers in wrestling.
And you know what? Obviously, the powers that be are listening. They know that Brock Lesnar...
The higher power?
Absolutely.
It's me, Austin. It was me all along.
I'm talking about Thor. He's a Norse god. He listens to everybody.
I'm more of a Loki fan.
Obviously. Wasn't he on Tough Enough? Or NXT or whatever it was?
No, that was Sensei.
Gotcha. But listen, the thing is that Paul Heyman comes back at the absolute right time.
Perfect. And I was sitting there watching Raw, and at that moment, again, because it hadn't been spoiled, and I had stayed off Twitter because I joined Raw late. I'd stayed off the interweb because when you don't want things spoiled, you just stay away from places that can spoil them for you. And Brock Lesnar's music's playing for an awkwardly long time, and then out walks with that sway, that swagger, Paul Heyman.
And
what a moment.
He looked good, too, didn't he?
He looked great. I was surprised there was no baseball cap.
Well, I mean, he can't hide it any longer.
Greensboro didn't do him any favors, though. That crowd was pathetic on Monday night.
Was it the crowd that was pathetic, or was the program they were watching was pathetic?
We'll talk about that Saturday on PrimeTime Saturday night, where we also will bring you part 2 of our interview with Billy Gunn. And before we do that, let's finish out this week's edition of PrimeTime Wednesday night and go into this week's profile, which will be of Paul Heyman. Yes, indeed, Paul Heyman is this week's profile subject, David Hero, the mad scientist of professional wrestling. He's been called many a time. A man who founded what would be known as Extreme Championship Wrestling, taking over from Eastern Championship Wrestling. And for those of you that don't know Paul Heyman and know how that whole thing transpired, it was Shane Douglas, Paul Heyman, taking the NWA Championship, saying it was insignificant throwing it in the trash can, and forming the World of Extreme back in, I believe, 1993, in a very controversial move, one that still is frowned upon in the industry.
Well, Paul Heyman took a bunch of guys that were really that they weren't welcome in WWE, they weren't welcome in WCW. They were all over the indies, tearing up the indies, doing crazy, insane things. Guys like Sabu, guys like Tommy Dreamer. And then you had
Mick Foley, Eddie Guerrero, Steve Austin. So many people spent time there.
So many guys spent time there. And he had the right mixture of everything he wanted. And it was like a bunch of rebels going out there, doing whatever they wanted to do. Great charisma, great matches, a fresh alternative to wrestling. And Paul Heyman was the guy that made that, what do you call it, smorgasbord of goodness?
A lot of people say that it was Eric Bischoff and Nitro, or Vince McMahon in the Attitude Era, or Mike Tyson, or Stone Cold Steve Austin, or the NWO that revolutionized professional wrestling in the 90s. The God honest truth is it was ECW that revolutionized professional wrestling in the 90s, because both of those organizations, WCW and WWE, took cues from ECW and made their product edgier. ECW is one of the most revolutionary things to have ever happened to professional wrestling, whether you agree with what they did or not. And that would transcend into WWE when Paul Heyman would join the company in 2001 after ECW had folded due to, quite frankly, some bad business practices, admittedly so by everyone. And then he would come back and join as a commentator in 2001, replacing Jerry Lawler, who had left after his girlfriend at the moment, Stacy the Cat.
That was his wife.
His wife, yes, at the moment,
yes.
Had left or been fired from WWE. Paul Heyman replacing him on commentary before he would go on to manage Brock Lesnar in 2002 when Brock Lesnar came on board. And many people credit Paul Heyman with Brock Lesnar's initial rise to fame in WWE.
Well, Paul Heyman has had his fingers in a whole bunch of different scenarios. I mean, of course, there's ECW. Mm-hmm. And then he was very influential in the career of Mr. Kennedy, Ken Anderson, mm-hmm. CM Punk, mm-hmm. Brock Lesnar. Mm-hmm. He's been very influential. He is a mastermind. He gets it. He understands the psychology. He gets the in-ring promos. He knows how to tell a story, which is exactly what he did Monday Night on Raw. He told a story about Brock Lesnar.
Some people say that Vince McMahon is a genius. You rarely hear people say that Eric Bischoff is a genius. If there's one man in the wrestling industry who comes close to the genius of a Vince McMahon,
thank you, it
would have to be Paul Heyman. It would have to be. Listen to everything you just said. Eric Bischoff never really made anybody. Let's be honest.
No, they made Goldberg because of everybody else making Goldberg.
ECW made stars. WWE made stars. At the helm of those organizations at the time were Paul Heyman and Vince McMahon.
I don't know if ECW truly made stars, because once they left ECW, with the exception of Rob Van Dam, and I'm not going to include Steve Austin, I'm not going to include Eddie Guerrero, because
Jericho,
or even Jericho, because at that time they really weren't. ECW wasn't as big as it went on to be. You know what I mean?
It did not have the national presence that it had at the end of its run, but it had more of a following, I think.
They made guys more aware, but I don't think they truly made stars.
Without their time in ECW, arguably, the people you just mentioned would not have ever been as big as they ended up being.
Stone Cold Steve Austin, when he left ECW and came to Raw, he was the ringmaster. He wasn't a star when he got there.
But why did a lot of those people get noticed and come over to WWE? Because of WWE's very close attention that they spent on ECW, and would be admittedly having bankrolled the company for a short time after the company's demise during the time when ECW had invaded Raw. It was all out there, as we said, David Hero, right in front of us for a long period of time. ECW, very influential and very important in the role of some of the stars that were built in WWE, in my opinion.
They gave him good groundwork. They gave him a good beginning. Yes, but and I'm sure I'm going to get crucified for this.
You deserve it.
I don't believe ECW truly made stars. When you think of stars, you think of Rock, you think of Austin, you think of Hogan, Flair, Goldberg, Sting,
Cody Rhodes.
Sure, John Cena, but I'm saying none of those. The biggest stars in ECW were Rob Van Dam, Sabu, Taz, Tommy Dreamer, Shane Douglas. When any one of those five left, with the exception of RVD, they really didn't have a whole lot of success.
Taz was huge. And Taz had only been in ECW.
Wasn't. He was like...
Oh, okay. SummerSlam, or Royal Rumble 2000, whatever it was. The match with Kurt Angle. Served Kurt Angle his first defeat.
Beat Kurt Angle,
big hoopla. Big.
And what did he do after that?
Big hoopla. No. Stop. Look, I'm in charge. When he came in, WWE made a huge deal. 13, Orange, the Taz, whatever.
Yes.
If ECW wasn't big, why would they make a big deal of Taz coming in as Taz, as he was in ECW, towel, shoot fighter look, all, if it didn't have significance, if they didn't make stars?
And once Taz got there, he beat Kurt Angle, then he went and tag team with Spike Dudley.
Well, that's the machine. That's how the machine works.
If he was that big of a star, he would have had a far longer career than becoming a commentator on SmackDown.
That was probably the best career move he ever made.
Of course it was. But I mean, and listen, I'm not taking anything away from anyone. No, I'm not. What I'm saying is, when they were in ECW, they were the top guys. They made a ton of money. They were the ones that people paid the tickets to see. I take that back. The Dudley Boys became stars in the tag team world with their TLC
Also
matches.
managed by Paul Heyman in WWE.
Yes.
Were the Dudleys.
But what I'm saying is,
along with Heidenreich,
as good as ECW was, they were amazing as a collective unit, but they didn't have any standalone stars.
ECW, Paul Heyman, a prime example of what a locker room means. What a locker room.
That locker room back in the day?
I was there once.
Wow.
A locker room that means.
You thought Shane Douglas had problems a couple weeks ago. Walk into that thing sometime.
Paul Heyman would also be the general manager of SmackDown for a time before being involved in the relaunch of WWE's version of ECW. And it was the December to Dismember pay-per-view that was the end of time in WWE between Paul Heyman and, well, obviously Vince McMahon, as they had a huge falling out, per Paul Heyman's recollection of events, on Air McMahon after that event. And as we know, that was one of the worst reviewed pay-per-view events in history. I never saw it, by the way, so I'm not going to say whether it was good or bad.
And why? Because ECW didn't have any stars on that brand either.
At that time.
Yes.
When it first launched, let's not forget, One Night Stand, the promo, JBL with the WWE guys, RVD beating John Cena in the Hammerstein Ballroom.
That was a magic. And then you had built-in stars on that pay-per-view.
You did.
Yes. You had guys that were in ECW that got that. Like, you had the Austin rub, you had the John Cena rub, RVD was on top of the world, but you also had, it was WWE versus ECW, One Night Stand.
And it felt somewhat real.
Absolutely, there's a lot of tension.
And everything, and people talk about how WWE is always protecting themselves, blah, 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 blah. That night, that event, and subsequent things have happened as well, they put everything in the lap of ECW's favor. It was in the Hammerstein Ballroom. Paul Heyman was involved. They brought back a lot of the original ECW talents. John Cena laid down to Rob Van Dam that night on that pay-per-view event.
And what happened shortly after?
Well, I mean, of course, they're always in control. Great, but as you said, it was a moment. It was a great time. It was a great night. But Paul Heyman would leave, be gone.
He gets himself in trouble, and that was the end of ECW.
Paul Heyman would leave, be gone, and never come back to WWE until this past Monday night. And wow, an amazing career. I would say we talked about who is close to the genius, if you will, of Vince McMahon. And you talk about Paul Heyman, I would say that maybe the next person would be Jim Cornette. But, the great wrestling minds.
Top three?
Absolutely not. No.
Brutal.
Well, I mean, I know you think you are, but I consider you probably 97, 98 on the list.
Those were great years.
No, not the year. Your ranking. That's this week's profile, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a timeout. When we come back, we're going to ask the booker a question. This is the Pro Wrestling Report, PrimeTime, Wednesday night.
Booker a question.
This week's Ask the Booker question comes from Joe out in Albany, New York.
Joe Mama.
He asks the following, and listen closely, David Hero, as you will provide the answer to this question. As a booker, how do you book matches containing legends and members of the current roster without making the legends look bad by showing that they can't really go anymore and or burying the current talent by having them get squashed? question comes from Joe out in Albany.
Well, what you do is when you bring in the legends, you let the legends get their stuff in, the stuff that they're known for, whether it be Hacksaw Jim Duggan with the Ho, Jimmy Snuka with the I Love You.
What'd you call Eve?
The head administrator. You know, you just let them get in what they're known for. I mean, you know, you put them in a tag match. If you know, listen, the current roster is always going to beat the legends. They should. The legends are a little bit older. They're a little bit, you know, they're not up to speed. They're not in as good a shape. As long as the fans get to see that little glimmer of that nostalgia of those legends, everything's going to be fine. I mean, look at how many times The Miz would go out there and beat Jerry Lawler or Hacksaw Jim Duggan or whoever. They would get their few spots in, but at the end, the current talent is who the people are paying to see, and that's why they go over. They never squash a legend because a legend is a legend. They're always going to be a legend.
What about Randy Orton and the Legend Killer gimmick?
Well, that was fine. All he did was give guys RKOs. He didn't really beat them or pin them. Well, yeah, absolutely. But there's no way you can truly kill off a legend.
Valid point. I think one follow-up question I'll add to Joe's question is proper utilization of these legends, if you will. How often should that happen? Let's say in the case of a Hulk Hogan, in the case of a Ric Flair, in the case of a Roddy Piper, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, some of the names you mentioned, is it ever too much to see them in the ring now?
I mean, a guy like Hogan who can barely walk, absolutely. Ric Flair, has overstayed his welcome, but listen, those are the guys that the fans still want to see. And as long as they still want to see them, they're still going to keep carting them out. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if it wasn't for the legends, wrestling wouldn't be where it is today.
Thank you so much for that question, Joe out in Albany, New York. You can send in your question to atb@pwrshow.com, atb@pwrshow.com, and you never know when your question may be selected to be a part of this very broadcast. That does it for this week's edition of the Pro Wrestling Report Primetime Wednesday night. We're back with you again right here on Saturday night, where we have part 2 of our interview with Billy Gunn to talk more about his opinion of the current state of professional wrestling and so much more. So for that one, this is Damian Nelson saying thank you so much for tuning in to PWR Primetime Wednesday night. We'll see you Saturday night around My 24 in Milwaukee.